right, and welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi. And sitting in my Star Wars room somewhere deep in the heart of Gentilly is Dave.
Hi, this is Dave Glado.
And Fredo.
Hello, this is Alfredo Narvaez.
And we are all celebrating a big Saints win on Monday Night Football. We're on Star Wars Eve. This is Star Wars Eve, isn't it? Yes, because The Rise of Skywalker comes out tomorrow. I have my tickets for 7:30, so hooray. And yep, so can't wait. I think I think it's going to be, as long as it's fun, that's all I care, you know. But the thing I'm really interested about is, I remember when I was at Celebration, and this is the first time you heard the Emperor cackle, and it was, how are they going to explain this? I don't know what the storyline is going to be other than that the Emperor's in it somehow, and I just want to know how they're going to work this one out. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. So
You talked about leaving your expectations at the door, and I think that's good advice. One of the things that immediately came to mind for me when I started seeing that some of the early reactions have been mixed, was Attack of the Clones, and what it was like at that point of my fandom to embrace Star Wars and have it not be cool. I don't know if a lot of people remember back then, but I thought this was a great movie. I loved it. I was like, I got to go see this again. I thought it was an improvement on The Phantom Menace at the time. I'm still kind of on the fence about which one's better now, but I was still excited about it, and I didn't understand the negativity, but I did understand the negativity was very loud and very present.
So it's funny. I love Facebook memories, and this week my Facebook memory's been inundated with from when The Last Jedi came out, because I had just had rotator cuff surgery.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I was captive in my house, and so I was like, well, I'm just going to watch. I did it in the my machete order, because I think you should. I think it's kind of cool. I did 4, 5, and then go back to 1, 2 and 3, and then 6. Everybody says skip 1. I like the Phantom Menace.
I like 1 too.
You know, people who don't like the Phantom Menace I think they're just beaten down by life, because it was a fun movie and it was exactly what George Lucas said it was going to be, basically. But anyway, so that was my machete order. I'm looking through this, and there was one post that I had, again, from a couple of years ago, which it said, people always ask me what my favorite Star Wars movie is. And I said, they're like, I don't have kids, but I said, they're like my kids. I said, I love them all equally. I said, that being said, episode 2 needs to go back to college, and episode 3 needs to quit drugs. So, I enjoy those movies, but they're the ones where it's just like, if it's on TNT, like, I'll flip over to something else and watch periodically, because I've talked about it before. It was the Padme, brushing her hair, and Anakin, can we go?
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about this before. I was just like, ugh, the Anakin in the Clone Wars, I've said it a gazillion times, is I can believe that Anakin became Darth Vader, and there's just some of the acting, and George Lucas is not an actor's director, but they also, I think, when they tried to do these super cuts with, this was a great Hayden Christensen cut, and here's a great, cut by Ewan McGregor, and then you put them together, and there's no chemistry.
There's no life to them, and that's part of the dynamic of taking from here and there. It doesn't flow naturally.
And the worst line of any Star Wars movie is, "You underestimate my power."
Yeah,
and that's but anyway.
But here's the thing: mileage varies on those movies, and we could talk prequels. That's a whole episode easily. That's several episodes probably. But I think, for me anyway, that feeling of the fan base had kind of turned on itself, and now here we are after Last Jedi, which had been divisive. Critical reviews so far are very mixed with the new movie. I think it's really important for us to just take a step back from it when we're going in blind still, and it's like, just go ahead and take it on its own merits and see what you like about it, because that outside noise, you can't let it get you down.
So you know what's interesting? You say that about Attack of the Clones. I can remember, actually, weirdly enough, I saw that movie twice on the same day, on opening day when it came out.
Yeah.
Like I went and saw it in the afternoon, and then for some reason I ended up by Esplanade Mall back when they had the old theater, and it was me and my brother Abe, and we're like, want to go back and see it again? Yeah, let's go back and see it again. So we just bought tickets and just walked into our late night showing and just saw it again. And it's interesting because I didn't do that for Phantom Menace. I mean, I did go back and see it. I did the same thing for Rancho of the Sith. And I think that's one of those things where in the moment you're just glad to get new Star Wars. And that's one of those things that for a long time didn't exist. For a long time when you said Star Wars, it was the stuff that happened on TV, came from TV and not again, or whenever you got VHS or home movies or Laserdisc, DVD, when the home media market kind of exploded, was, they're on a shelf and you just throw them on whenever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the extent of it. That was the limitations of it. No, so the idea of getting new Star Wars was always like, well, that's neat. That's okay. I haven't seen this. Let's go. And then it's not until it became part of, okay, now you get to shelve it alongside the other ones, that the criticism really got into earnest, because now you have to contextualize that movie that used to be the new Star Wars against everything else that has that same title. And that's where I think some of the dynamics and some of the criticism, a lot of the flaws get exposed, because, the more you look at something, it's kind of like if you see a word, the longer you stare at it, the less sense it makes, the more it starts to look kind of weird. So I think you'd run into that issue with these movies, because you see it again, and every little flaw pops out.
I think The Last Jedi gets a bad rap as well. But of course, my favorite story about that one was, I saw The Last Jedi 3 days post-surgery, or about 2 days post-surgery. And I remember when we were scheduling my rotator cuff surgery, they're like, it's like, okay, well, how about we'll do it for this day? And then I quickly realized, oh, crud, that's when The Last Jedi comes out. I was like, can we do it a couple days earlier? Oh, yeah, Tuesday's open. All right, yeah, let's do it on Tuesday. So, yeah, I had on Tuesday, and we went to the Thursday showing. I was on drugs. I mean, they gave me what called a pain ball, which was like this baseball-sized thing of drugs that was connected to my neck that I could control if I needed a little bit. So I remember this was an actual thought in the theater when I'm watching this movie going, am I enjoying this? Yeah, I think I am. But that was like, maybe so I didn't, it was a totally different Star Wars movie than I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And every time I watch it now, since then, I like it more. And so I think The Last Jedi just gets a bad rap. So
if you think about that movie, and I'd say Attack of the Clones, I go back to my experience with that. Those are two of the most ambitious movies in the canon in terms of trying something different and trying to fit a bunch of things in.
If you notice, it's the second movie of the trilogy, because Empire, when it came out, was not well received by everybody.
So, and I've heard that that's a critique of this movie. It's too packed. There's too much. They try to do too much. It's too ambitious. And I'm like, I'm sorry. If you're ambitious, I'm going to reward you with. I'm going to enjoy it more. I just am. We've
talked about checking it, expectations at the door, and this is no spoiler here or anything like that. It was just one thing I've always been thinking about, because J.J. Abrams has been talking about linking this is going to be linking the prequels and the original trilogy, and everything's going to be linked together. So this is the last thing we'll say before we move on to our little trivia bit here. Yes or no? Are we going to see Force Ghost Anakin? Are we going to see Force Ghost Hayden Christensen in this movie? I think yes.
I think we will. I think if we're trying to tie everything together.
Hi, I'm Hayden Christensen.
Yes, it's going to happen. It's going to run through your head the moment he pops in and sees it. Because there's been some kind of news about potentially bringing Hayden and James Earl Jones to do some kind of either Darth Vader series or mini-series or some other project. It's been rumored. Because, there was... because apparently Hayden turned up at Galaxy's Edge, and there's been some interviews with him. So, it's one of the things. I think he's reaching the point in his life kind of where he's made his peace with what that experience was like. Kind of like what happened to Mark Hamill for years. Kind of was trying to find his way away from Luke Skywalker, and then eventually just kind of came back to it. What was I going to say? I think we will see him, just because if we're trying to bring it back together, he's a big part of it. And look, for the 2 movies, we've seen Rey and Kylo Ren fight for his lightsaber. So it's the sword of Anakin that everybody's been wielding and calling, Excalibur, the Excalibur of Star Wars. So,
Dave, what do you think? Not do you want to? Do you think we will?
Yeah, I'm really on the fence about it. I don't feel strongly about it. I think they've paved the way for that to happen. Like the way that he appeared at Celebration and was warmly embraced.
And then how he was quickly, there was, I think, some con that he was supposed to be at, and they canceled. He had to cancel.
Right.
And it was kind of like how Ray Park canceled the Wizard World con here 2 years ago, right before Solo.
Right.
And looking back, hindsight being 2020, it's like, oh, somebody had some voiceover work or some not voiceover, but the filming to do. Anyway, sorry.
We've all seen the artwork, right? Mm-hmm. The concept art of him being like half man, half evil thing or whatever. And so I certainly they paved the way for it. I just have my doubts. I just don't think that JJ. I think he's going to pay respects to the prequels, but I don't think he's going to try to incorporate them to large effect.
That's the other thing that this podcaster I've listened to. He similar where he's like, he wants to see all the Gungans and battle droids and Ewoks and everything at the last. He said he wants all the Force ghosts. He wants just a ton of Force ghosts, to be coming out. So anyway, all right. So Rise of Sky, we'll know tomorrow.
Return of the Jedi was originally envisioned that way of a.
Well, yeah, because Yoda and Obi-Wan come back and actually,
and we're supposed to actually be involved in the conflict, not be bystanders.
Yeah,
and they just didn't go that direction. So that's been sitting on the shelf for 30 years now, and
there's no idea that can't be recycled.
So the last episode, we started a new little bit here. I pulled out the Trivial Pursuit Star Wars Saga Edition. It is covers episodes 1 through 6. So we're testing our Star Wars geekdom this time. I'll ask the first question of Fredo, and then Fredo will ask Dave, and Dave will ask me. So I don't know what categories these are. I'd need the instructions anymore. And it's getting late in the night, so I have to hold the card further away from my face. So here we go. What planetary system is found to have been purged from the Jedi archives?
Oh, trying to remember.
There's a Mandalorian link here.
There is a Mandalorian link there. That's episode 2, Attack of the Clones link there. Oh, shoot. I can picture the planet. I can picture the race of people in it. I cannot think of the name.
Starts with a K.
Oh, Camino.
There you go. There you go. It's like you had an office party tonight, so we'll forgive you. And you just started drinking beer, so
Not a good idea. Not a good idea.
By the way, there's other ones in here that was kind of funny. We were just talking about this to everybody at the table. What character in Phantom Menace was portrayed by an actor who performed his own stunts but had his lines overdubbed?
Ray Park.
There you go. Darth Maul or Ray Park. Yep.
Okay, now who dubbed his lines? Do you remember the name of the actor?
I don't remember who dubbed his lines.
Oh, the act. Well,
we have a dog trying to break in.
I believe his name is Peter Serafinowicz. He's better known to everybody as Sean's roommate in Shaun of the Dead.
Ah.
He was also in Guardians of the Galaxy. He's got this nice voice.
This is why Fredo's on my trivia team. All right.
I know who you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. He does good work.
That's the voice of Darth Maul.
All right.
In Solo, they used the Clone Wars
yeah.
actor.
Mm-hmm. Sam Witwer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. What Jedi, speaking of Attack of the Clones, what Jedi speaks for the Geonosian Arena survivors when he says, "We will not be hostages to be bartered, Dooku"?
Well, that would be the estimable Mace Windu.
Correct.
First best
Star Wars moment is when the lightsaber flies into Rey's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Second best moment of any Star Wars movie is when Samuel L. Jackson is walking up behind Count Dooku and lightsaber to the throat.
Purple
This-
lightsaber.
This party's over, Dooku. You know, it's like, and when you see Sam Jackson walking, strutting in, it's like, oh yeah, that's a great moment.
That
Anyway,
is a good
go ahead.
moment. Okay, so this question is for you, Aaron. What type of starfighters make up the Green Squadron at the Battle of Endor?
Those would be the A-wings.
You are correct, sir.
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, that's our trivia. Hopefully you're playing along. We give you enough time to answer. So, yep. That'll probably be one of the New Year's games we play is Star Wars trivia. And,
Drive all the non-Star Wars people nuts.
yeah, that's true.
Let us know if you like it too.
Yeah.
If you like the trivia stuff.
This podcast, we never really tell you where to find us. We're on Podbean, right?
Yep.
And and you can find us on Twitter at Whodat Jedi and on Facebook as well.
Yep.
So please let us know what you think. And right now, this podcast has been talking about nothing but really The Mandalorian because it's just easy fodder for us right now. And we're up to episode 6, and this is The Prisoner. And starts off with the Mandalorian flying into some hangar where he meets up with the guy from Batman Begins.
Sons of Anarchy, yeah.
And that was
looking like the way he looked
you know,
back then.
it was funny because one of the guys, Blind Wave on YouTube, they're a great group of guys to watch reaction videos for anything. And one of the guys said the exact same thing I was thinking when I first saw that. I was like, wow, you don't like falafel? You know, it's like, but that's not the first Batman reference in this episode either. So, we'll talk about that later. But so he flies in and he gets a job as part of a crew, and that's where all the cameos kick in. One being, notice Tonks from the Harry Potter series.
Natalia Tena, aka also known as Osha.
You know,
in
this
Game of Thrones.
This podcast is awful because it's like we got Chubbs, we got Tonks.
And we got the Kurgan
So yeah, okay, so we got the Kurgan.
from Clancy Brown as I don't even remember if they said his name. They might have.
But here's what's cool about this. I mean, we got a Twi'lek,
Mm-hmm.
and then we got the Devorian. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
The devil dude from
The
species from the Cantina.
That was so much fun because I got to point him out to his species to my kids because we watched A New Hope almost right after watching this episode, and I was like, "You got to look out in the cantina and see if you can see one of."
See, that's good parenting, Dave. So but that is what I like, that they're not creating just new species.
Yeah, that was one of my complaints about Force Awakens. It was like I wanted to see more of those familiar species that we'd seen before.
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, so we get a job and they're gonna go. And well, there's also a droid who is voiced by the guy from the IT Crowd, then that's the crew for right now. Oh no, and then there's the comedian
Bill Burr.
Bill Burr,
who was. It's hilarious that after appearing on this, he had to go back and defend himself because he'd been talking somewhat about the Mandalorian and Star Wars in general. He's not had his comedy bits had not necessarily been all Star Wars positive, to put it mildly. And so it's hilarious that he was like, all of a sudden he's in a Star Wars episode. And he's like, dude, you were talking all that junk. What happened? So, but I think what I find interesting is we mentioned in the last episode how the series is pushing Mando further and further into extremes, and this is another step in that line. He's going to some place that he knows is not to his benefit, to take a job from people he cannot trust.
And he has to work with people. Yeah.
From the moment he gets down the ship, it's almost like they all had a big old sign saying, "We will betray you at some point in this story." Like, they might as well have had it written it out and had cheerleading squad saying it.
Which, fast forward to the very end of the episode, like the last line is when he turns to Baby Yoda and says, "I told you that was going to be a bad idea."
Mm-hmm.
Which we'll talk about later. But I mean, yeah, you're right. It's like the minute they get off, it's like he said he was an Imperial sharpshooter, and he's like, well, that's not saying much. I wasn't a stormtrooper.
McClunky.
They're making fun. Yeah, but that I thought actually everybody. I liked all the characters in this.
Oh, I hated them, but I liked that I hated them.
Right.
They're just despicable.
But I just thought,
terrible.
I mean, it was like in the last episode we talked about, I didn't feel like what's her bucket in the mechanic and the fanboy. It just was kind of some bad acting. This was actually really good acting. They created a character, and I mean, even though it was, Tonks, it wasn't. Now, I will say that I didn't really like the vampire-esque way that they portrayed Twi'leks, but whatever. I don't know. There's just too much,
Too much hissing and
yeah.
things.
But anyway, whatever. I'll get over that. But like I said, each one of them, they were just good characters, and good antagonists to the Mandalorian. So, so they need the Mandalorian ship, because I found this interesting. We now know that it predates the Empire. So this is an old ship, and because it's off, it's a ghost. They say, it's off
not
the charts.
registered on anybody's list.
So they need his ship to get in and into a Imperial prison ship. I immediately
New Republic
thought
prison ship.
New Republic, yes, a New Republic prison ship. I immediately started thinking about all the Irish songs that I sing about prison ships. And it's like, think about this: they just put you on a ship and you're just floating out in space. But anyway, so they swoop in and they're off to go pick up or free this prisoner. I know I just fast forwarded through a whole lot. Is there anything you want to talk about that I missed leading up to this point that we're docking into the ship? Because again, this podcast, we don't really talk about the plot per se. It kind of helps move us along.
The droid character ends up piloting the ship, and some of the broadcast from Chubbs begins to periodically pop up for him, which is a tell that eventually these unsavories are also going to figure out that Mando is valuable.
And we did miss something, as they're kind of having their banter on the ship on their way to the prison ship, the door opens and there's Baby Yoda looking at everybody.
Yep.
And he said, what is this, like a pet or something? Yeah, something like that, and so now you're like, the guys hold Baby Yoda, and it's like, I think another meme I saw somewhere or somebody posted said, I swear to God, if anybody hurts Baby Yoda, I will lay waste to everybody, And when the ship starts a rocking and he drops Baby Yoda, again, there's a moment where my wife and I went,
I'm beginning to think that they know what they have. Like when we first started this, I thought, oh, they're going to off Baby Yoda, because they had no idea how big this character would be. But then this episode's got me rethinking that, because they are trying to elicit an emotional response from people by having these unsavories basically pass Baby Yoda around amongst themselves.
So yeah, they're interested in Baby Yoda, and they like I said, Baby Yoda gets dropped, and then the Mandalorian puts him back in his room, and and Baby Yoda is just the typical toddler, doesn't stay where they're supposed to, But anyway, so yeah, they get on this prison ship, and it is occupied by droids, and that's an important thing. That was told to Mandalorian that, those were the only, things they're going to be dealing with, which I find interesting, because when they fast forward, when they actually come in contact with a human on the ship, his code kicks in. He has no problem laying waste to droids, but it's like, it's kind of what struck me, and I know I'm fast forwarding a lot here.
That's fine. Yeah.
We're going to probably skip around here, but I want to talk about. No, I won't. I'll talk about it later when we get there. So first of all, they're going through the halls, and they get pinned down by some droids, and and all of a sudden the Mandalorian isn't there, and everybody's like, "Geez, okay, he split."
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we first see Mandalorian really in his badassery, as it is, because all of a sudden, from behind the droids, he comes in and just cleans house. And I just thought, we've talked about, Boba Fett fanboy type stuff. This was everybody's, oh my God, dream. I don't know. What'd you think about him taking out all the droids?
I mean, first of all, you needed to have that moment in some way, because through the start of the episode, all the other characters kind of been picking at Mando, making fun of him, threatening Baby Yoda.
It's kind of like the rookie on the Saints that all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
does a big play, and yeah.
And it's like there's a reason why they wanted him there, even though they know one another, and that there's no trust there. But throughout the episode, they've been picking on him, so you needed that moment to kind of reset him back to, okay, this is how good he is, this is what he can do, and kind of put them on the spot of, okay, if we go up against him, we might lose.
And then they knock him back down by saying, "Clean up your mess." They're not.
Exactly.
They play it off as they're not impressed.
Right, which they clearly are, but at the same time, there's also, again, there's no trust there. So because there's no trust, there can also be respect.
Now, I will say, we talked about, I like how they're revisiting some old aliens from the original saga. I like how their droids are different, though.
Mm-hmm.
I like the droids that they have in this series so far, because this one they have with the crew, Zero, he's kind of a different looking droid, and these guard droids kind of look like the commando droids from the Clone Wars animated series a little bit. It's that. But like I said, I do like the droids, and again, the special effects has been great. I mean, they're obviously CG, but so they make their way. They get to the control room, and there is a human in there, which, by the way, is the actor Matt Lanter, who was the voice of Anakin from the Clone Wars.
Fun trivia.
Yeah, and Chicago from Pitch Perfect 3.
Mm-hmm.
So,
no, and it makes sense.
My nerddom knows no bounds.
That's all right. That's why we're on a Star Wars podcast. But it's interesting, because it makes sense that there would be a human handler. You wouldn't have an old droid crew. You'd have somebody who's human on top and in charge of making decisions here. And also because you need to establish a certain separation between Mando and his teammates, for lack of a better word at this moment.
Yeah.
You need to establish that he's not like them anymore.
They're gross and awful, and he still has some standards.
Well, and sorry, I got to back up a little bit more. I'm sorry, I've got ahead of myself. But as they're walking, they're seeing the cells. We're getting glimpses into the cells. And by the way, I want to say what I liked about this episode was the way it was shot.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I like the quick edits. I like the camera angles. I like the lighting. I think this was probably the best shot episode. That we've had so far. I just really dig it. But anyway, so we see in the cells, we see an Imperial officer. We see the species of Rio Durant from Solo, which makes sense because that's what Jon Favreau voiced, in Solo. What else we see in there? Those are the two that really stuck out. But I like those little quick glimpses. It almost reminded me of Silence of the Lambs when Clarice is walking to Hannibal Lecter and getting a little bit of prisoners here and there. But thank God that's where it stopped. But anyway, so we get to Matt Lanter, and he's like the human. He's got 4 people
pointing
guns at him. And he's obviously really scared. And the Mandalorian has a code that this guy he has nothing to do with why we're here, and he's not going to, lay waste to him. And it reminded me of my wife when she was at school she previously taught at. It was after one of the Mardi Gras where there was a shooting down, around the parade route. And her kids in the class the next day, or like that next week or whatever, were saying, that is just absolutely wrong. That basically they were saying that's against the code. That, that it's, if you're going to, shoot it out, you're going to have it out. You don't do it around you don't do it at school. You don't do it, around a bunch of innocent people. So it's like there's an honor among thieves, if you will,
what's interesting is that at that moment, I just thought to every heist movie and every bank robbery movie when the masks come off and somebody spots the thieves with the masks, is like, okay, you've been exposed. This person cannot live. Because otherwise he's going to be around and somebody's going to question him. It's going to get back that it was this person and this person, this person. There was somebody wearing Mandalorian armor, and you're like, once you start doing the math at that point, it's like, okay, this person's gonna die.
Well, we talked about it in episode 3 when he spared the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that was, we all were kind of like, well, yeah, this kind of shows you that he's just not going to kill an innocent, and that shows you something about his character, but that's why he's being tracked all over the galaxy now.
Yeah.
He left that guy alive, and that's I don't think anyone else in that complex would have necessarily been able to ID him. So it was that decision that really put him on this course.
Mm-hmm.
So the New Republic officer has a beacon
Mm-hmm.
that it's a tracking beacon that will, and then the droid Zero says New Republic is alerted. They'll be here in 20 minutes.
Right. Which how big is this ship? Because they ran through a lot to get to the control room, and then a lot to get to the cell they were looking into. But then it felt, and then they ran back, and it was a lot of running through the ships. But from the shots of the special effects, I didn't get a sense that was that big, but I guess it was.
Yeah, I don't know, but
Yeah, the concept of time here was a little shaky.
so they they know they're being tracked. They got 20 minutes to get the prisoner, and they bust him out, and this is when the old switcheroo kicks in, and they kick the Mandalorian into the cell, and
What I found interesting is that the prisoner, and I forget his name, Sean
Quinn.
he knows the Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
So they've done work. I mean, they all seem to know one another. There's kind of
At least the Tonks and Quinn and Mandalorian. Yeah,
they know one another, as well as the guy who put them onto the job. There's an awareness of how one another functions, but there's not necessarily trust. There's not necessarily respect. So it makes you think what happened between them that may put them in a spot. Because at that moment you're thinking, okay, of course they're going to betray the Mandalorian. That's what they've been setting him up for all episode long, and of course he's going to find a way out.
Yeah. So, and which he does, and so he ends up. It's so cool how he got that droid and ripped his arm off, and then broke his way out. But however, I do like how I saw somebody mention, it was on some YouTube clip or something, how they're kind of making fun of the fact that technology for unlocking doors in Star Wars hasn't changed in since episode 4 or since episode 1, really, if you want to go chronologically. But I'm like looking at my own doors going, yeah, ours haven't either.
Mm-hmm.
People get so hung up about how it's like, why don't the TIE fighters look different in episode 7? They just look like the old TIE fighters but with a different paint job. It's like, look at a 79 Mustang and look at a 1990 Mustang, and they pretty much look like the same car, just with a couple little things sanded down and different paint job. So it's just funny how people kind of freak out over the technology hasn't advanced, and it's like,
which also, I mean, when you also got to realize this is a galaxy that's been in a state of constant war for 4 decades, give or take. I mean, between the Clone Wars, the time of the Empire, and then the Galactic Civil War, there's rarely been, technology leaps forward during war, but it takes decades afterwards for all that technology that was developed for war to disseminate down to, people, into normal society. Think for everything like the microwave or Velcro or crazy glue, stuff that was done to help in military functions, and then it took years for that to find its way into commercial, non-military function.
Before we move on back to the Mandalorian, here's my other rant: is that the people who complain that the Vader helmet in episode 3 was not the same as the Vader helmet in episode 4, and I'm like, would you be wearing the same underwear 18 years later? It's that thing's got to start smelling after a while, and yeah, you're probably going to get a different helmet. I mean, again, that's where Star Wars fandom starts to tick me off after a little bit. It's like, let's think about things a little bit more rationally here.
It's been explained away. I mean, if you looked at, it's been said, it's been written in, forget how many countless books, comics, whatever, that Vader would continue to tweak his armor and try to make improvements of it to try to make it better. So it makes sense. This is the thing that's keeping him alive. He's not just going to stick with the same design that he got slapped
But I don't.
on.
But I don't need comic books and books to tell me that his helmet's going to change because I'm not wearing the same pants that I did when I was, in my 20s. I'm just that's so anyway. I'm done. I'm off my rant there.
Well, I think that in this particular case, you're looking at a situation where you're trying to establish Mando as even more of a bad a guy who can really take care of business, and you're also just trying to bust him out of there so that the story can advance.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be any more complicated than
So-
that.
So he does break out and he makes his way back to the control room, and then it now becomes a Batman movie.
Yeah.
Lights go red, and everybody is now being hunted, and he is.
I thought of Alien.
I mean, so
Similar.
similar. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many. So where I really saw Batman was at one point where the strobe lights were going behind. I think it was Mayfeld,
Mm-hmm.
and you saw the Mandalorian a little bit, then you didn't see him, then you saw him a little bit more. I mean, this whole thing turned into an 80s horror movie at this point.
Film, yeah.
It was, and again, he was hunting everybody.
Yep.
He's locking
And-
doors. He's separating them. He's splitting them. He's letting them fight one another.
So
And you start to figure out that they don't trust one another either.
And I thought every single one of them was dead. I mean, especially when the Devorian,
when the door
when
slammed.
the door slammed on him. I mean, that harkened back to the first episode.
Mhm.
But I'm like, okay. Ooh, I mean, when that happened, I went, "Ooh, my good God! Oh, all right." And then everybody else, they played it off. I was like convinced that everybody was dead. Meanwhile, Zero finds
Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda, and we have our own little
Beast story.
Jurassic Park, Home Alone, yeah, thing going on in the Razor Crest with Baby Yoda, and that was just funny. I mean, I was like, I was expecting Baby Yoda to do some stuff, and so I think I've talked about best Star Wars moment was the lightsaber going into Rey's hand. Second best was I can't remember what I said.
Mace Windu.
Mace Windu, that's
The
right.
Purple saber.
Third best is when Baby Yoda, I'm sorry I'm fast forwarding here, but Baby Yoda is holding out his hand and he's going to do some stuff with the Force, and all of a sudden, the droid basically blows up, and then they have the puppet look at his hand like, oh my God, I did that? Because
With Mando,
the
right.
Mandalorian took him out. I just thought that was an awesome moment. I don't know. What you guys?
Yeah, it was lovely. Yeah. It was
What I
funny.
find, because I find interesting is, and it's something we've said in past episodes, they like setting stuff off and paying it off in the same episode. Normally, because they're making a big deal of Zero, kind of reverse engineering Chubb's Grief Karga or Chubb's message to Mando when he brought back Baby Yoda initially. So clearly he's paying attention to that, and he figures out, okay, this is a valuable asset that can get paid, whatever. So he goes to track it down, and you would think, okay, this is gonna end up with he's gonna get out with Baby Yoda, and Mandalorian's gonna have to track him down. Nope, it gets paid off in the same episode. He finds him, he's gonna shoot him, and next thing you know, Baby Yoda puts out his hand and he blows up, and that's it.
Yeah.
So they're very good about tying everything off within the episode.
And it's also like we talked about, they put in humor without being gaggy.
Mm-hmm.
That's just by him, the puppet looking at his hand. I mean,
That's physical comedy.
Yeah, it was. And it's a puppet. It's
you
just like
have to lean into physical comedy because, like you said, he's a puppet. But for the Mandalorian, it's the same deal. He's this armored guy. You never see his face. You can't convey emotion in that way other than through body language. And so they have to lean into those sorts of.
But of course, and it's also good because it was a really intense episode. There was a lot of knives being thrown. There was a lot of droids being, cut. The blood coming out of the, droid's arm when he ripped it off. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
The oil, this is pretty like I said, it was an 80s horror movie, and then you've got to have that moment of levity to make everybody just kind of, and it was at the perfect point because your nerves are tense and it's like, oh my God, he's gonna shoot Baby Yoda. And I remember I said they can't go to that well too many more times. They did it again. We thought, the shot was at Baby Yoda. I don't know how many times this is going to happen.
Without it actually
But-
going at Baby Yoda.
But we fall for it every single time. But then, just to have that one look at his hand, it was like, you let him down. And then, of course, and I'm kind of hustling through the plot because Dave, you said you had a lot of things on your mind for this episode, so I want to get to that. But so he goes back to the hangar where the guy from Batman, Begins was, and gets off the ship with Quinn, and he says, "Hey, where's everybody else?" And he says, "No questions asked, right?" He's like, "Yep, that's the policy." And of course, that's I think when they cut and we see that everybody's locked up in a cell, or maybe it's a little bit later. But anyway, so nobody died. Again, he could have very easily killed all of them, but he didn't. And maybe it isn't. Maybe it is one of those things where that wasn't the job.
Right.
I don't know what it is, but
Or maybe it's Baby Yoda's influence. Maybe being a parent is shifting his perception on the value of life.
Well, I think it probably goes a little bit. I mean, he obviously has no problem killing. Well,
in self-defense.
Right. But I think he could have argued self-defense in all of this,
He probably would have.
But so anyway, we find out that the tracking beacon is on Quinn, and 3 X-Wings come out of hyperspace as the Razor Crest is flying past.
Because he gets paid, and they're, Batman Begins guys, tries to scramble a fighter to go out and shoot him out of the sky.
Shoot him, yep. And the X-Wing fighters were Dave Filoni and Deborah Chow, who is doing the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. She did a couple episodes of Mandalorian.
The Sanctuary episode.
And then actually the director of this episode, I can't remember his name. Pardon me, last name starts with an F. But anyway, so that was kind of some neat cameos, and they blow up the
space station.
The station.
That's vengeful, though. I mean, like, we're talking about how he's practicing restraint with the others. So it makes you wonder, like, well, why in this case he's like, screw these guys, they can die. I think.
Well, I think it's because those 2 are the ones that set me up. These guys were the ones that that were hired to.
That would be my impression as well.
Yeah, that were to get me. So, they were doing a job just like I would be doing a job. So locking you up, but you 2 are the ones I have a beef with. So I think that was probably why.
But it shows limited growth, I guess.
Yeah.
Because we're giving him credit for, showing restraint with these others, but when push comes to shove with these 2 who he thinks really did wrong him, he's like, okay, but you're gone.
But it's also a question of he knows he can't neutralize them in hand to hand because they're, he's not on he's on their turf. There's way more people can get involved, get in his way, and he may just be simply be looking to see, okay, what are you gonna do to me? And then when they pay him and send him off, he's like, oh, you're totally gonna betray me.
Well, but again, I'm sorry, but it is very getting back to my Batman thing. Mm-hmm. It was Batman Begins when he says, "I'm not gonna kill, I'm not gonna kill you, but I don't have to save you." Mm-hmm. He didn't kill those 2.
Oh, he killed them because he brought that little tracker thing and he planted it on.
Well,
him, so,
he put the tracker thing, and he didn't know that X-Wings were going to. What I'm saying is that he didn't. There's a little.
There's a little wiggle room.
There's a little wiggle room.
That's their comeuppance.
But so then last episode I mentioned this, and I got ahead of myself. Then we get to what I thought was very interesting. First of all, I like that the Mandalorian screws off the gear shift knob and gives it to Yoda again, right. Baby Yoda, and but then he says, "I told you this wasn't a good idea," which then makes me wonder: what are those conversations, or is this like me looking at one of my dogs saying, "I told you this wasn't going to be a good idea,"
That's probably what it is. Yeah,
I got it kind of like if you were talking to one of your kids, going like, just talking to yourself, but your kid's present, so you're talking to them, you're directing at them, but they're looking at you like whatever, but you're working through your own thought process. Because like I said, we know he's getting driven to take on more desperate jobs from shadier and shadier people. This was one of them, and so he knows that maybe he didn't leave on good terms. He definitely knows he can't trust them. He also knows he needs to get paid because he needs fuel and repairs and all the other stuff.
I think it also talk about the growth. I mean, when they first with he and Baby Yoda, it was don't touch that. And now it's like, I told you that was a bad idea. Unscrew the thing. Here you go, play with it. So I mean, it's again,
Routine.
he's the typical, again, the dad that we don't need a dog, and now the dog is his best friend. So I mean, it was a fun episode, and again, I didn't really feel like it propelled the overall story. That's why in the last episode we talked. So that's why I came to the conclusion this is just very episodic. It's like, this is the Mandalorian adventure for these 40 minutes, and it was fun. It showed me, we saw more of his skills in, how cunning he is, how, his, I guess, a little bit more of his moral compass, I suppose. But, and like I said, I loved the way the whole episode was shot. But yeah, what do you overall?
Well, this is where I might be able to wax poetic.
Go for it.
If you guys are ready.
Go.
I got a beer. It's all good.
Yeah. So we talked about this idea of is there a through line? Is there a point? Where are we going? What is the what's the ultimate story? Because these are so self-contained, these episodes so far. The one thing I always circle back to, the major theme of this series, for me anyway, is that we all have this baggage and we all have this armor that we put up around ourselves. And in this case, obviously, it's literally manifested in the armor with the Mandalorian. Now, is there value in shedding that armor? And I think, like, over the course of this season anyway, we've seen some growth from him in that regard. We've seen him begin to allow these other characters into his life. He allows himself to care for some of these characters. So we're seeing that begin to happen. I think we have multiple sections of dialogue dedicated to this concept that he can't remove his helmet, and we've discussed that, and like, what does that mean within the canon? But for me, it creates this question of, well, when's it going to happen? Because
what's going to be the thing for him to commit the sin, right?
What will cause him to do this? Will it be his choice? Will it be somebody else's choice? How significant of an event will it be? I mean, it needs to be significant at this point, right? Because, like, we've dedicated so much time into telling that story. Like, this is almost become tiresome in a way, because you think about the number of times people around him have spoken to this. Oh, he can't take his helmet off, which is kind of cool because it reveals something about the characters who are making those statements. Like with the widow, for example, she was very respectful of that, and she wanted to hear his story. Whereas with, like, the Twi'lek in this episode, it was something to mock him over. So it reveals something more about the people he's interacting with, more so than it does about him. But it's still kind of something like, we're going to keep bringing this up. So we're bringing this up for other reasons, I think. And so beyond that, like, you have this level of the theme of shedding our armor, and you have this level of he literally can't take his helmet off. We also have thematically, I keep seeing this like going on in the background, either in a background shot or within the plot of a particular episode. That theme keeps coming up. And I'll just run through a couple of these. Like chapter 1, they have to find the prize. He has to penetrate the complex. He has to penetrate the armor. He has to remove the armor. And then he has to look inside the carriage, which reveals Baby Yoda to him, which at this point has become the most significant character in his life as we know it. In chapter 2, his ship literally gets disassembled before his eyes, and he has to rebuild it. In chapter 3, he sheds his old armor and is basically reborn as a more powerful, effective version of himself by adopting new armor.
And is that because he became more vulnerable by caring for this other creature?
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, go down the list. Chapter 4, the villagers have to take down the ATST, and this armored creature. He has to rebuild his ship again in chapter 5. Chapter 6, we have to penetrate this complex to achieve our objective and defeat these robot guards, again, armored guards. So clearly this is what the story is meant to be more than anything else. The lone wolf and the cub, as we've talked about, telling this story about how Baby Yoda will help the Mandalorian become a more whole individual. I think this is where we are, and this is what I think we can definitively say what the series is about. Now, what I find interesting is I read another article about the show on Slash Film from Josh Spiegel. So Spiegel or Spiegel. I can never get that right, but I'm using the German pronunciation, Spiegel. And he talked about the Kuleshov effect. Have you guys heard of this? Okay. So essentially what the Kuleshov effect is, it's a filmmaking technique that came about in the early days of filmmaking, like 1910s, 1920s. And so what it was essentially an image or video of a man with an expressionless face, intercut with imagery that are just random, So you'd see this guy's face, then you'd see a girl in a coffin, and then they cut back to his face. His face never changed, but people would ascribe changes in his reaction.
Right.
So it's like matrixing almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so this is a filmmaking technique that's been around forever, I guess. And people, they would ascribe this meaning to the actor in question. Oh, God, he's in grief when he sees the woman in the coffin. Or if there's a delicious meal, oh, he's hungry. So this article speaks to this and argues that, where we are right now, the viewer's doing all the heavy lifting in terms of interpreting what the actors are doing. Yoda and Mando are both, basically blank slates, and we're required to put this emotion into the story. Now he argues that at this point he couldn't get invested in this story because of that. He can't get past that particular technique. And he says we should unmask him to move the story forward. Now I think there's value in him continuing to be masked, which is where I'm coming to. A lot of people have, justifiably or not, been obsessed with Boba Fett in the past. Fan obsession for decades. And I think part of that reason that people were so obsessed with him was because there was a mystique around him.
Well, he just looked so dang cool.
He looked cool, but you also didn't know anything about him. So you could just kind of overlay whatever backstory or interesting abilities you wanted to put onto him. When he was finally given a backstory in Attack of the Clones, it didn't live up to people's expectations.
No, there we go.
They had 20, however many years at that point, 25 years of expectations that had just built and built and built and built. It didn't end up working for people. I still liked it, but a lot of people didn't. So for me anyway, a reasonable takeaway from that experience, Lucasfilm had this happen. They literally did this with this character. No backstory might have sufficed in that case. So on that basis, since keeping this sense of mystery, I think it can build our appreciation for this particular character as it did for Fett. And I know that the directors know this, but the question then again is like, when should it happen? I think it's been built up to such a degree. Like every episode, it just keeps coming up. It has to be a significant event. I mean, it just has to be something major. His armor is the story. So when we get to that point, I think we can look back and we can say that this particular, the Kuleshov effect, it doesn't make this story a bad one. I think it's just a natural storytelling technique to lean into in this case, because we are telling the story of a man who must eventually remove his armor, but just can't do it. And so, like for me anyway, reading that article, I thought it was really interesting. I learned a little something more about film that I didn't know before. But I disagreed with it completely.
So, do you want to know the best example that helps you disagree with that? The greatest character in Star Wars history.
You know,
Vader.
I was actually just going to say that. You know, I had a teacher in high school that I took. He was an English teacher, but I also took film comp and movie lit from him. I mean, obviously that was my senior year when film comp and movie lit. But the thing he hated most was that in Return of the Jedi, they took off Vader's helmet.
They sullied Vader's beautiful black visage, revealing that he was a crusty old white man.
But
saying deep down, we all wants to be white.
But I mean, of course, now looking back to it, I'm like, dude, I can't believe you're an English teacher because you just missed the whole point of the entire trilogy. But you see the point, and it is like, if it gets to the point where the Mandalorian is helmet on, helmet off, helmet on, helmet off, what's that going to do to his character? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I talked earlier, about, last episode about Sabine, in Rebels. Yep. Helmet on, helmet off, it didn't matter. But they didn't make a big deal about it. Now it's a big deal. And you're right. It's like, what is going to be... So what do you think is going to be the thing that's going to make him take his helmet off?
That's a good question.
Is it going to be Baby Yoda or is it going to be the Widow?
I think if there's anything that we've shown at this point, it's that Baby Yoda is what matters most to him, at least right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I think
because the Widow got close.
Yeah,
she did.
And I like the idea of him taking it off for her as being the kind of capper to the series, or eventually, like, he gets to ride off into the sunset with the Widow. But there's going to be a point where this helmet, I think, is going to have to come off.
I don't know. Okay, I agree with you that at some point it will come off. I don't necessarily know that it has to, just because you're establishing, because the helmet is, that's why I was comparing it to Vader. You don't think of Vader's helmet as a helmet. That's his face. The fact that he cannot move, he has no expressions, whatever, doesn't matter. From the first moment you see him in episode 4 through the moment he dies, when or moment before he dies and gets pulled off, it's a helmet, but the visual, the impact, the voice, his mannerism, the way he stands, the way he projects power and fear, all that is coming through, and it's coming through that mask. It's the reason why Empire Strikes Back's poster right up there has Vader's image. That's why he's the #1 movie villain. And, we only see his face for a few minutes in the original trilogy. That's it. Everybody, if you tell everybody what's the look of Darth Vader, it's that helmet. That's his face. So sometimes I think that it's vital that, at some point in the story, it must come off. It will have to come off. I just don't know that it's necessary that it does come off so early, because that's who he is. So he's a Mandalorian. That's the oath that he's taken. That's the code that he's assigned himself to. So the idea of removing his face, he's got a face underneath. We know this. But he would stop being the Mandalorian at that point.
So, there's actually, going back to when the armorer was saying, have you taken off your helmet, but has anybody taken it off for you?
Right.
So, like, it sounds like it is a sin if it's taken off, like in battle or something like that. and I'm looking at my Rebels poster here, and there is a scene in Rebels when Ahsoka is fighting Vader, and she slashes across his helmet, and actually you get, his helmet is slashed in half basically, and you see half Anakin, half
Yeah, you see
Vader.
his eye.
Right,
come
right.
out.
And,
That big battle.
and that's when, so it is that, so I think it'd be very interesting, or like the Captain Phasma moment in Last Jedi,
Mhm.
when that helmet is kind of split in half, and you see
Her eye.
the human nature to her. And I almost wonder if, again, poetry rhymes, I almost wonder if we're going to see something like that, because again, I go back to that episode, it's the sin. And again, we talked about what the sin is. I still think the sin, it was obvious that thou shalt not take off your helmet, and thou shalt not have anybody take your helmet off for you. So I think that becomes a sin. So it's going to be where he's probably going to have to, something is going to happen where with that helmet, with the armor, that is going to make him pull away from the Mandalorian covert. I don't know. But I see that, something is going to, I don't think it's going to be I'm taking off my helmet for the grand,
Finale.
the display of Pedro Pascal's face. I think there's going to be something in battle when, or kind of like the Phantom of the Opera,
Mhm.
that when, his mask is ripped off his face and you see what he looks like, and then he automatically hides it, so I could see a lot of those kind of.
It could play out a lot of different ways. I just really struck by this theme this week in particular, because also the name of this episode, The Prisoner, is like he's a prisoner to his
It's
armor.
like the last episode. The gunslinger, I don't think was the fanboy. I think it's whoever it was at the end. I everything is not. A lot of people will say the clear choice is probably the obvious choice is probably the right choice, but I mean, I think they're playing with us in these things. I think you're right. The prisoner. I think you're right. There's a double meaning there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's pretty much all these titles have had double meanings.
Right, in some way, shape, or form, implying that
Well,
there's more going on.
Yeah.
Well, because remember, we're having to imply, we're having to look at the subtext because we cannot see his face. But in some ways, that helmet is his face. I was thinking of somebody like Batman, like we were talking about Batman Begins. The fact that if you look at Bruce Wayne without the mask, he's a normal guy. He needs to put on the suit, the cape, and the cowl to become Batman. The idea of you become a different persona or a different person when you put on these trappings. And if he is removed or he takes off his helmet and his armor, that's why he's no longer a Mandalorian. He's no longer wearing the trappings that give him. He may still have all the skills, but he doesn't feel the same way. He's not the same character anymore.
Well, he was also not born Mandalorian, to your point.
Right.
So that those feelings of not being this thing, this persona, this person, I'm
Only
sure
get worse.
it would get a lot worse for someone who wasn't born into it.
You took us to the deepest point that we've been in this podcast so far. I mean,
Drinks.
yeah, that's what happens when
submarine.
you drink beer and talk Star Wars. But no, again, it goes back to the expectations of the viewer. Again, my expectations were there was going to be, because it was only going to be 8 episodes or whatever, like we said in the last one, there was going to be point A to point B to point C to point, and just it was going to be clear path, that here's the ultimate goal that we're reaching for. And again, it's just episodic, and it's about, really, it's really the first act. If you think about it, I mean, it's a lot of vignettes to get us set up, for things. I think, I don't think you're going to see you might see his helmet come off I don't think you're going to see it until season 2.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think
because
it'll happen
that's
this season.
the second act is when conflict happens.
But they have. I mean, they did confirm season 2's ago.
Yeah, it's being filmed. Yeah,
because it's one of the things. I know in the past when we talk about what else we were geeking about, I discussed Watchmen for a moment, and that just ended this past weekend. And what's interesting is the creator Damon Lindelof came out and said, "Yeah, I have some ideas about what I may do, but I may just simply leave it as is, just a self-contained 9-episode series." And sometimes, I mean, Dave Filoni has been living and breathing Star Wars for years. So you know he has some points he wants to hit, and you know that there's some point he wants to reach. So I wonder, this he's not making this to kind of be like Law and Order and run for like 50 years. He knows he has a beginning, a middle, and an end point.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if, even though it feels episodic, if he's trying to set, I mean, he's building his galaxy, he's setting up his character, but I wonder where he's driving us towards, because he must have a plan. He obviously has a
And
plan.
we got to give Favreau credit too, obviously.
Clearly, they know they know where they want to get to. I guess was my point. And sometimes that where to get to can be contained in 9 episodes of 1 hour. Sometimes it takes several seasons of 30 to 40-minute episodes. So kind of figuring out, that at some point some of these elements will come to the foreground again.
The thing that stuck out with me on the surface level, I love the way this whole thing was shot.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, we mentioned, the cameos with the X-wing pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And is it Deborah Chow? Is that right?
Deborah Chow, I think so.
If that's her first name, but anyway,
Yeah.
she directed Sanctuary,
Right.
and she also directed the episode that dropped tonight.
Okay.
And she's the one doing. I believe she's the one that did tonight. She's also the one who is doing the Obi-Wan series, and I am now. She did those 2 episodes of The Mandalorian, and I am totally on board with her doing the Obi-Wan series, because
This episode was from Rick Famuyiwa, who
the prisoner is
the prisoner is
the one that dropped tonight is
Yeah.
is Deborah Chow. I was kind of fast forwarding here a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but again, I think it's been really cool to see each director have a different take on different eye. But like I said, I really dug this episode with just the lighting and the camera angles and everything, like I said before. But I think your point is very well made, Dave, that you're right. This is the overall arc is not the plot.
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah. I mean, it's something a lot deeper than that. And that's, kind of interesting that Star Wars is going into a, deeper realm, but that's why they have to have this fan servicey stuff, because you can still enjoy these episodes without doing a 1-hour podcast, on it. That's so.
And I think too, it's fun to take part in the episodes in the way that we're being asked to as viewers, with this blank slate and how we have to interpret things. Kind of forces you to pay attention a little bit better in a way, because you know that the body language is going to convey certain things. I go back to his interactions with the widow, where she would leave the room and his gaze would just fix on her, and just kind of a wistful, it would be nice to be with her kind of a thing. You can infer all of that just from him holding his gaze in a particular direction for an extra second, and it's enjoyable, and it keeps me invested week after week.
So, real quick, as we start to wrap up, just a little temperature check. Baby Yoda, overdone yet?
Not yet, no.
No, not
But
really.
you're right. They keep putting him in harm's way, and eventually it's just gonna ring a little hollow, I think.
I almost wonder if the cliffhanger that's going to be at the end of this season is, some big kaboom, and then we have to wait,
a year.
however long to see did Baby Yoda make it. But I will say, it's kind of like Gremlins. The Mogwais are cute. Gremlins 2, yeah, kind of over it. You know what I mean? So that is. I think they're just putting a little smattering of him in, at the proper times. It'll be interesting to see if Baby Yoda is part of the plot in season 2.
Because the other thing is, I mean, we've established that he's a long-lived race. We've established that even though he's 50 years old, he's no more than a toddler at this point. Doesn't have vocal skills. He clearly can hear well and can do some stuff, but he's not even, speaking, so to speak, to put it that way. So in other words, this is somebody who's going to lead decades in order to reach even the point of a child who can go to school or whatever. In other words, it may be a situation where that may be the purpose of the Mandalorian. Find where you can leave him, that he can be safe and grow, because it's going to take him a century or so to reach adolescence.
It's going to be tag team parenting, basically.
Yeah,
I want to see Baby Yoda say, "You're not my dad."
Well, that's the thing. He's not going to live, even if he lives to a long age. I don't expect the Mandalorian is of a species that lives as long as Yoda's species.
Oh man, now I want a Baby Yoda series, essentially where so he's on the Mandalorian. So then we'll have that for a while. He'll be parented by Mando. Then next parent, and then we're gonna be told that story. I'm here for it.
You can pick him a few decades later, or a few centuries later, and he's now grown and he's now a teenager. He's being all rebellious and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
All right, so as we get towards the end here, I have, and we said leave expectations at the door. Tomorrow, seeing the Rise of Skywalker. So what could happen that would make you throw down your popcorn and want to leave the theater? What is a moment that you would be dreading? What would make you go, what would ruin it for you? I will start it off.
Yeah.
I think if they do anything to Chewbacca, the Millennium Falcon, or C-3PO or R2-D2, that would just tick me off. If this is the last, quote unquote, the last, they did anything to those four in a permanent way, that would make me, I wouldn't leave the theater, but it would make me mad. That's mine. I think they're evergreen. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's my fear is that we're going to see Chewbacca flying the Millennium Falcon and all of a sudden, and yeah.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm trying to think of anything that would make me upset with it. I don't know. I really don't know if there's anything. I mean, the fact of the matter is
Misa back.
Oh.
even that. And by the way, that was a wonderful callback that they had in the episode.
That's right. You said don't want to show your face.
That's right. Exactly.
It's pretty funny.
I'm going with no expectations. One of the things, for all the criticisms,
I'm saying no expectations, but I was saying what would ruin it for you.
No, but I'm saying one of the advantages, despite what a lot of the critics would say regarding Last Jedi, is Rian Johnson left a wide open space for J.J. Abrams to play with. He had freedom from all the puzzle boxes and all the trap doors that he had set himself up. He was free. He was free to write whatever story he wanted, to design whatever movie he wanted, to take these characters to a conclusion, whichever way he wanted. So I think I'm just gonna go in there and see, okay, how do you conclude this story? I don't necessarily, and this is one of those things that kind of gets me upset. There's always this desire within fandoms or fan bases to demand an answer to everything. And that's not really a need for that. You don't need to know where every secondary character came from, or where so and so got this.
That's why there are comic books and other books. Yeah.
Well, but that's there are ways to get that if you need it. But your story, in your movie, should tell the story in the movie. You don't need to give, an hour of exposition just to set up your movie. You shouldn't. You've already had 2 movies. You know what the stakes are. You know who the characters are. You know who the players are. Let's just wrap this up in a good, comfortable. I think that'll be the biggest thing that would upset me. If we get to the end and I find that I'm sitting there going that's it, that might make me upset. But other than that, no. I'll just want to see where we go next.
I tend to agree.
No, what would make you throw down your popcorn and go, I'm out?
Baby Yoda comes out as Palpatine.
I was trying to think of there's a lot of like unlikely things, like you mentioned, like Jar Jar coming back or Padme or some of these prequel era characters. Like
Oh,
that would
Padme's dead, but
that would
She died of a
let me
broken heart.
ask you: Force Ghost Padme?
well, that's what I'm saying. Like I would roll my eyes. I don't think that's particularly likely though. So as far as things that might be something that might occur that I might not like, undoing Luke's death. A lot of people didn't like how Luke was handled in the last movie, and I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was perfect, and so if they changed that, I would be very disappointed. Beyond that, I mean, there's really not a lot. You talk about leaving your expectations at the door. I have one expectation. I want it to have a sense of scale. I want it to be big and crazy and insane, and for there to be things that I've never seen in a Star Wars movie before. And if they fall short of that, I'll be like, well, okay, it was still fun. But that's really what I'm hoping for.
And I guess, okay, we don't need to talk about it now, but we may discuss it once we sit down and have seen Rise of Skywalker and kind of what's going to happen next. Because this is an interesting discussion that should be happening about. We know that after this,
I think their money is in Disney Plus.
yeah, well, that's what's interesting. You know that they've announced there's going to be a break from the movies. Technically speaking, you know, you've had the Game of Thrones guys deal fall apart. The Ryan Johnson trilogy deal is kind of murky. The Kevin Feige produced movie trilogy is kind of, murky. You know, when you look back at all the issues that they've had putting movies, Star Wars movies, ever since Disney got it, you know, they had issues with Gareth Evans in Rogue One and editing that. They fired Lord and Miller out of Solo and brought in Ron Howard. They fired Colin Trevorrow out of Episode 9 and had to run to go get J.J. Abrams back in here. You know, and then you have all these deals that they've announced that are either fallen by the wayside or are kind of sitting in hiatus. So it'll be an interesting discussion to see where they go beyond Episode 9. And if like you said, if they're going to be, okay, we're going to focus exclusively on Disney Plus, or if after a few years of letting the field get, replenished, they go to come back with what?
Would your faith be shaken somewhat if this movie wasn't good, or you didn't like this movie? Because given what you're telling me about, again, all this well-documented stuff that we know goes on behind the scenes.
No, I don't think my faith would be shaken, because part of the dynamic is, I can take the movie as its own thing,
Right.
but I do think it's an interesting discussion that, can be had regarding the dynamics of having bought up one of the biggest properties in movie history, bringing it back to life, trying to pump billions of dollars into it because, well, you bought this asset, you have to use it, and then kind of running into all the trips and falls that come with, okay, we're not just making one movie, we're making a franchise, or we're expanding a franchise. And when you look at everything from this, I mean, they've had issues with the video games, with their deal with Electronic Arts. They've had issues with some of the other properties that they've tried to make. I think really the books are the only stuff that, like, everybody's like, oh yeah, that's good. And then The Mandalorian.
So on a lighter note, we're going to kind of spoil the entire movie right now because I found the track listing that we talked about the last episode. Found the track listing for the Rise of Skywalker soundtrack
On Spotify.
And so here they are. It's going to spoil. It's like in episode one of the tracks actually was, Qui-Gon's funeral. But here we go. This is spoiling the entire movie for you. And it really isn't. But anyway, track 1, Ray Trains. Next one, Ship's Landing, followed by Tatooine Sunset. Next, Ray's parents are Ewoks. Track 5, Lin-Manuel Jedi Rap. Track 6, Poe and Finn Bone Remix. Track 7, Watto's Revenge. Track 8, Darth Maul Cameo. Track 9, Cantina Song featuring Blues Traveler. Track 10, C-3PO is Evil Now. 11, More Like Daddy Vader. 12, Millennium Falcon explodes. 13, Chewie sent to prison. 14, Boba Fett is alive. 15, warning from Han's ghosts. I actually said Han's ghost.
Han.
Whatever.
Yeah, no.
whatever number I'm on. Surprise, Luke's alive. Next one, Luke dies again. LOL.
Yeah.
Next one, whole galaxy burns down. Next one, it was all a dream. And then finally, Jedi Rap reprise. End credits. There you go. That's the whole movie.
In a nutshell.
Ray's parents are Ewoks. I like that one.
Oh, I love how that comes
what if
right after Tatooine Sunset, which is like semi-plausible, and you're like, oh gosh, these are spoilers, and then go right into the Ewoks.
So I guess one last quick guess. What do you think the Rise of Skywalker means? I still have this I am Spartacus moment where Skywalker becomes, a lot of people saying I am Skywalker, I am Skywalker, I am, it's like becomes a not a name, but a
title,
a
like
title,
Caesar?
Right?
I was thinking maybe it'd be like a title like Caesar, like because remember, the Roman emperors called themselves Caesar because they were taken after Julius Caesar, which he didn't call himself Caesar. That was his name.
I would be okay with Luke coming back as a Force ghost and having a crazy Force ghost type of battle with the evil Force ghosts. And
Palpatine.
yeah.
You mean kind of like in Big Trouble in Little China? when,
There you go.
When they were like,
Yeah.
they're all dueling, and then all of a sudden they form like armored vests, spectral figures, and they're dueling.
See, we're revealing our ages, I think.
And we've started talking about Trouble in Little China, so I think it's time to go to bed and wrap this episode up of the Who Dat Jedi. And Saints have Tennessee on Sunday, and let's hope it's not a trap game because we need to win out, and go Vikings, beat Packers.
Yes, go Vikings.
And you know what?
Seahawks.
It's actually plausible that actually the Rams have the 49ers, so it's plausible that they could, beat them. They might be hungry.
Rams have been a little feistier lately, a little bit.
But anyway, so go Saints. I'll have to find a place in Nebraska to watch the game, which is going to be tough, but Brittany and I will find it. So anyway, with that, we will say good night, and thanks for listening. Check us out on Podbean and on Facebook and on Twitter, Who Dat Jedi. And we will see you after the Rise of Skywalker and the next Mandalorian episode. So with that, we'll say Who Dat?
Who dat?
Who dat?
McConkey.